You know, we all grew up with those classic fables. Stories so familiar, they feel like they're just part of our cultural DNA. But what if I told you that some of the most famous Western fables actually started thousands of miles away, on a totally different continent? Yeah, today we're going to uncover a hidden globe-trotting history that you probably never learned about in school.
And we're going to start with a pretty surprising admission from the master of French fables himself, Jean de La Fontaine. Right there, in the intro to his second collection, he doesn't take all the credit. Nope. He gives a shout out to someone he calls Pilpay, an Indian sage.
So, okay, that one quote immediately makes you wonder, who was this mysterious Pilpay? Well, answering that question unravels this incredible literary mystery that stretches across continents and over 1,000 years of history. Seriously.
So to get to the bottom of this, we've got to look way beyond 17th century France. We need to jump back in time to an ancient book that became, and get this, a medieval bestseller.
Turns out, La Fontaine's secret source, the book written by this sage, Pilpay, is a collection of fables known in the Arab world as Kalila wa Dimna. And this book, this is the key that unlocks the whole thing.
Now hold on. This wasn't just some simple storybook for kids. No way. This was a super sophisticated guide to power, to politics, to human nature, all cleverly disguised and told through the lives of animal characters.
Kalila wa Dimna actually belongs to this really cool genre of literature called a mirror for princes. And the idea was simple, really. Use these super entertaining, allegorical stories to teach future kings and rulers some very real, very serious lessons in statecraft and how to be a good governor.
So the stories all play out in this bustling animal court, where every single creature is basically a stand-in for a type of person you'd find in a real royal court. You've got the Lion King at the top, powerful, but maybe a little too easily influenced. Then there's his trusted, honest advisor, the bull, Chanabe. And right in the middle of all the political drama are our title characters, the two jackals, Kalila and Dimna. These guys are the cunning courtiers, always scheming, always trying to climb that ladder of power.
And the central plotline here is just a tale of raw ambition. The jackal, Dimna, he gets super jealous of the bull's influence with the king, so he uses rumors, lies, and all sorts of political maneuvering to take him down. I mean, it's basically a political thriller that feels incredibly modern.
Okay, so the book's incredible journey from east to west, and the version that pretty much took over the world, well, it's largely thanks to one key figure back in the 8th century. And what he did was so much more than just a simple translation.
All right, let's meet him. Ibn al-Makaffa. He was a Persian scholar, and he took this book, which had already made its way from India to Persia, and he translated it into Arabic. But here's the thing. He didn't just preserve it. He completely transformed it into an absolute masterpiece of Arabic literature.
And this brings us to a really fascinating debate among scholars. Was his work just a direct, literal translation, what's known in Arabic as tarjama, or was it a creative adaptation, a ta'dil, where he actually reshaped the whole thing to fit his own time and culture?
Well, the evidence for adaptation is pretty much overwhelming. You see, the original Indian stories, the Panchatantra, they were often kind of amoral. They just showed you how the world works, warts and all. But Ibn al-Makaffa, he added a clear moral framework. And his biggest change? He added a whole new chapter, the trial of the treacherous jackal, Dimna. This brought in this idea of justice and punishment that was really important in an Islamic context, but just wasn't there in the original.
So this new, powerful Arabic version by Ibn al-Makaffa became the definitive text. It was like the launch pad for the book's epic journey across the rest of the known world.
I mean, you can see the book's incredible voyage right here. We're talking about a journey of almost 1,000 years, passing through at least 4 major languages and cultures before it even gets to medieval Europe. So it starts in India as the Panchatantra, then it travels to Persia and gets translated into Pahlavi. But the real game changer is that 8th century Arabic translation. That version becomes the source code, basically, for its spread across Europe, popping up in Greek, Hebrew, Spanish, and Latin.
Okay, so now we can finally connect all the dots. Let's circle all the way back to our famous French fabulist and that surprising thing he said. How on earth did these ancient stories end up with him?
Well, by the 17th century, this book had already been floating around Europe for hundreds of years. And La Fontaine, he had access to 2 recent versions, a French translation called the Book of Lights and a Latin one. Those were his direct links, his hotline, all the way back to that ancient Indian source.
And when you actually compare the stories, the influence is just undeniable. I mean, take the tortoise and the 2 ducks. In both tellings, you've got this chatty tortoise being carried on a stick by 2 birds.
She opens her mouth to say something, and bam, plummets to her doom. The moral about vanity and knowing when to just stay quiet, exactly the same. And we see the exact same pattern in The Fish and the Cormorant, which La Fontaine reworks as the heron. In both stories, it's an old bird who's not so good at fishing anymore. So he tricks his prey, offering to move them to a safer pond, but of course he just eats them one by one. The parallels are they're unmistakable.
But here's the really cool part. The story doesn't stop in 17th century France. Not at all. In fact, this ancient book is still very much alive and kicking, and it's a beloved classic in many parts of the world right now.
And you can see its lasting power so clearly. For example, in countries like Tunisia, school kids are still reading Kalila wa Dumna in class. They're learning lessons from the Lion King and the Jackals, pretty much the same way French kids learn from La Fontaine. It holds that same kind of foundational spot in the culture.
You know, the journey of these fables, it just reveals this profound truth. Stories don't really belong to any one culture. They're travelers. They cross borders and centuries. They get adapted and retold, and they become part of this shared global heritage we all have. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other stories that we think of as ours are actually just echoes from a much older, more connected world, just waiting for us to discover them.